Okay, welcome to my repair video on replacing a carburetor on an EH65 engine. As you can tell, this is a older engine. It's made by Subaru Robin. I've had some difficulty with it over the past few years. One of the problems I had is the float in the carburetor actually decided to give out on me and cause some issues. That was replaced. And since then, it's not run quite right. Last year, it started barely running, and the only time it would run is if the choke was on. So it tells me that something is wrong with the carburetor. Probably something either has broken inside or something's clogged it. This particular engine is on a PowerTrack PT184. As you can see, the engine itself actually drives hydraulic pumps. So it's a fairly unique machine, but we'll go ahead and get it started into replacing the carburetor on this one. And of course, the first thing we had to do is remove the air cleaner nut. We could do that with our fingers. Okay, we'll go ahead and remove the nut from the top of the air cleaner. Easy to accomplish. Simply twist that off with your fingers. As you can tell, this engine has been on this machine for several years. The original engine that came on this was replaced somewhere around 12 to 13 years ago. This particular air cleaner has two elements. It has a foam element that has the regular filter element. Okay, and that is easily removed. Okay, now we have 3 bolts that actually hold this part, which is the filter housing, onto the top of the carburetor. So the next step is to remove that. Okay, quick reminder, as you start into this, you want to make sure that your fuel is completely cut off, either at the tank or with a fuel clamp. You can obtain those at pretty much any automotive location, Harbor Freight, any place like that will have the fuel line clamps. Also, another item that you'll want to have is a magnetic parts tray. If anything happens, you do not want to lose the connecting bolts that you need for this. Also, make sure your battery is disconnected. All right, we'll go ahead and remove these 3. Hopefully not lose any. Okay, the 3 bolts are removed, and that required a 10mm wrench. I'll add that in the information for the video, so you'll have that. Okay, there is a breather hose that connects to the very bottom of this. You can see the breather port here. That actually needs to stay on the engine. Okay, so the cover is removed. From there, we could take a closer look at it and see that Of course, there's quite a bit of grit and grime over the years, but the inside of the carburetor, fairly clean. Exterior's fairly clean, but like I said, with the float disintegrating on me a few years back, it tells me it's time to either rebuild it or replace it. In this situation, obtaining the parts for the complete rebuild of the carburetor would cost more than what the replacement carburetor did. So the next thing we're going to do is we have two hold down bolts on each side of the carburetor that need to come out, and the carburetor should lift off. However, you have one more fuel line. We'll want to clamp that off too, just in case there is some fuel that remains in there. We don't want it to go everywhere, so we'll clamp that off. Okay, to install a fuel line clamp close to the carburetor, I really don't want it to interfere with anything I have to remove, so I will place it right here, and we'll clamp that off. Of course, part of my glove with it. Okay, fuel line is clamped off. Also, you will want to remove the solenoid plug that controls the fuel flow, and that is part of the electrical assembly located here, and we will have to see where the plug is located. It's a crimp connector, and I don't want to destroy that. We'll go ahead and figure that out. So I will go to the other side of the machine and we'll try that. Sure enough, a simple barrel connector for that. Simply pull that loose, we're good to go. That is the fuel control solenoid. So apparently once the key is off, it closes, so the engine cannot run unless there's power to that. So we'll proceed with taking the bolts out once the fuel line is removed. We have one small spring clamp, which is rotated in a position that it's not easy to access, but not impossible either. Okay, and as I know for a fact, we're going to have fuel leave this system. We'll have something down below it to catch that, so it doesn't actually go anywhere into the engine that I have to clean up later. So, just a drop. That's all well and good. We'll move the fuel line out of the way for right now. As you can see, the choke connection here, I'm leaving that connected because there's really no way to get that out with the carburetor on. And then the throttle, which is down below, I'll leave both of those on, and as we remove the carburetor, we'll be able to remove those. Make sure that you got a good record of where these are set up. You do not want to move these. If you do, you're going to have a problem starting, running, or stopping your engine. Okay, again, these are 10mm bolts. That one popped loose fine. We will proceed with removing the bolts. Get one out. Now, another thing I need to mention, on the bottom side of this carburetor is a small vacuum hose. It's at the very front, up near this solenoid. Be very careful that you disconnect that and do not pull it loose from the engine. Otherwise, it's a, well, shall we say, it's a bad chore to get it back in. Okay, bolts are out, carburetor should come off. I've got to work very carefully to make sure that I get the various connectors off of here and the springs relocated so that we don't lose any of those. I have to have both hands to do that, so therefore I'm going to pause the video for a moment and we'll come back and we'll discuss what we found on the carburetor. Okay, the connectors are now loose for the choke assembly, and the throttle assembly slips out. Of course, I've already unhooked the spring. I've removed the spring and the connector from the choke, and of course we did have some fuel in the carburetor that leaked out slightly. As we turn this over, of course, we have more fuel, and we will catch that appropriately. Okay, now, as you can tell, part of the gasket stuck directly to the carburetor, which is not a surprise to me. This carburetor itself has seen better days. Yes. Here is the model number, if you can make that out. And it's a 610027-951 263-62381-00. What that means, I haven't got a clue. But we had the carburetor off. Looking at it, I've seen worse. Of course, I've seen better. The next thing is to clean the intake. We'll have to do a little bit of work with some carburetor cleaner and a gasket scraper to get that prepped for the new carburetor. All right, that is going to end the first video. The second video will pick up replacing the carburetor. So hopefully this is giving you some information on how to remove it. Again, some history on this machine is a PowerTrack PT184. Actually purchased 1997 time frame. Like I said, the original engine was replaced with this Robin engine several years back. It's all hydraulic. All the wheels are driven hydraulically. The PTO is hydraulic, steering's hydraulic. It actually pivots in the center, sort of like a articulated front end loader. So just come back, watch the other video to see how we put the carburetor on.